So, on Sunday night, I saw Malum. From what I gather, it was a limited release, and a limited release is the closest I've gotten to going to any sort of exclusive screening or a movie premiere, which is absolutely a bucket list item of mine. Unfortunately for me, I seem to be out of town every time there's some sort of letterboxd event in New York City, so I don't get to go to those very often. Doubly unfortunate for me, I did not really like Malum that much. And from my understanding of Last Shift, the 2014 indie film this is a remake of, coming from that very same film's writer and director, I might add, this is a bit of a hot take. So allow me to explain. I feel like at this point in the life of this channel, I've reviewed a fair share of horror movies, or if not outright horror movies, films that have horror elements prominently featured throughout them. It is not my favorite genre per se, but it is definitely one I am more fond of. And within this genre, I tend to seek out more experimental types of films, I suppose. So, when I saw a hype train building up on TikTok recently detailing how this movie was basically going to be a more polished version of its successful indie original, I was super excited. I heard great things about how interesting and thoroughly terrifying Last Shift was. I was expecting something pretty great, in all honesty. And I did not get that. Did I get something bad? By no means was Malum entirely bad, but it had several elements that became increasingly grating as the film went on. Things that bothered me and took me out of the moment. Things like dialogue that felt wooden and stilted. And I mean, pardon my harsher critique here, but if you're literally making a movie for the second time and releasing it again, I'd hope for some more polished lines for your cast. It feels like more thought and care went into the backstory of the Malum cult than the words the actors would have to convincingly say in front of a camera. That really sucks. And it especially sucks when you're thinking to yourself, these feel like first draft lines of dialogue in a movie that is on its second release. But within the horror genre, bad dialogue is not necessarily something that's going to ruin a movie for me. There is, however, one thing that can do that. Do you remember in the 3rd grade the first time you had a creative writing assignment? Even before you got those prompts to take home and start working on them, your teacher tried to give you one warning. One thing to not do above all else. The thing that ruins almost every story it appears in. 6 words more impactful than any story Ernest Hemingway himself could ever cook up. 6 words that are a death sentence to fiction stories in any medium. And it was all a dream. Yet, what are all the threatening and seemingly consequential scenes in Malum? Hallucinations, illusions, fabrications. Not exactly the same as dreams, but repeated frequently enough over a short enough timeline, and they begin to feel just as contrived and meaningless. In fact, the visions and hallucination episodes were actually so frequent and so detrimental, I could physically feel myself becoming less and less tense as the film went on. I became less fearful of what could possibly come next, less wary of what was lurking in a shadowy doorway or creeping through the darkest corners of the police precinct. Why? Because I was increasingly thinking that whatever was about to happen wasn't actually happening. And again, that really sucks, especially when you're trying to make me care and feel invested about what's going on. On the other hand, I am fully willing to admit that this movie felt phenomenal for the first half hour or so, when I had no clue what the hell was going on, when I was still trying to determine what exactly the threat was, what this building is, and what forces might be plotting against our protagonist, Jessica. This was an incredibly tense period for me. I was on the edge of my seat, my heart rate was rising, my paranoia was building with every glance that my eyes shot at the edges of the frame for almost every single sequence. But with each scare, each tiny reveal and progression of the plot forward, that feeling faded. There became a comfort in recognizing this hallucinogenic pattern, an apathy towards the ineffectual results of each sequence. Certainly our character became more stressed and more shaken, but she felt no more in peril, no more beset upon by dark forces than she did earlier in the film from an audience's perspective. And that is where Malum loses me. In spite of its many interesting ideas and an incredible amount of polish, in spite of its inspired costume design and special effects, in spite of its unsettling atmosphere early in the film and a setting ripe for terror. In spite of all of that, it just doesn't deliver. It doesn't give me anything to keep haunting me after the credits roll. Nothing to make me walk a bit faster on my way home. Nothing to make me look over my shoulder. Nothing to keep me awake a little bit later that night. Not so much as a memorable or disturbing moment to run through my mind while my sleep paralysis demons come to visit me in the middle of the night. And, for the third time, that really sucks. To me, that is one of the quintessential parts of the horror experience, just completely absent from Malum. That dread and unease is more powerful to me than any sort of jump scare ever could be. That is real fear, not something only shown to someone in a flash, but an itch of an idea instilled in them for a long time after your film has reached its end. That is true impact. So, did I love Malum? No. Were there parts of it I loved? Yes. The beginning was a really incredible sequence of events in my eyes. The film loses steam progressively from there, ending in a worse spot than it began in my opinion, but there is still a lot to enjoy along the way. In spite of their weak lines, I felt each actor gave strong performances. Particularly, Jessica Sula finds a way to be super endearing and likable, as she is forced to carry most of this film herself. I was rooting for her all the way, even when I felt my enthusiasm for the film overall to be waning. On top of that, I'd like to emphasize the amount of polish put into the visual side of things here. Gore and creature effects were disturbing and highly convincing. The early parts of the film create a fantastic atmosphere, and the set pieces in the police precinct are always entertaining at the very least. I also thought the found footage clips and interviews to be quite well done and particularly immersive. Camera work overall is really motivated and manages to put you on edge more than once. I will, however, complain about Chekhov's window and fitness center, though. Audio balancing felt spotty at times, but it was nothing compared to your average Christopher Nolan experience. That, however, was really small potatoes compared to the other issues I felt were prevalent throughout Malum. There's more good than bad, but the bad is definitely noticeable. It's like burnt bits of steak. Is it going to prevent me from enjoying the cut and the other parts of the meal that are done well? No. Does it still leave a shitty taste in my mouth? Yeah, but if you get a chance, I would say maybe check out Malum or Last Shift when you're able. Horror, especially smaller horror, misses much more frequently than it hits. So finding something smaller you can support and appreciate is always nice. I'd give Malum 3 out of 5 stars, and suggest checking it out if there's nothing pressing in your scary movie queue. In fact, I might wind up checking out Last Shift just to see if it is definitively superior to Malum or not. That's all I got though. Lots of stuff has came out in these past few weeks, and lots more is coming out that I'd love to review, so I don't really have any idea what's in store for me next. Creed 3, John Wick 4, Mario, and Dungeons of Dragons are all at the top of my list, and that's just naming blockbusters. Might be leaning Dungeons and Dragons though, because I am a slut for a good adventure movie. Decisions. If anyone has seen Malum or Last Shift, I'd love to hear your thoughts on one of them or the both of them in the comments below. Also, open to taking any suggestions anyone might have for next reviews. With all that said, until next time.